on this episode of the WildFed podcast.
Black folks hunting almost seems like an oxymoron, even though historically that's not particularly true.
And I just remember lining up that shot and my brain went on overload for a tenth of a millisecond. Don't mess this up. Don't mess this up. After the triggers pulled, my brain went to a whole different space.
This ATV pulled up. I looked at that guy. He was aggressive at first with us. What I saw was the potential for the nightmare scenario, and I saw the potential for like a beautiful scenario.
It's been really amazing to get into what it looks like to be a wild human and a human that's actually connected to the landscape.
The sound of a breeze hitting the trees, the sound of that blue jay in the background, the little rustle in the leaves, even that alone, it deepens your relationship with the world.
It felt like a walking meditation the entire time. It felt almost too natural, really recognizing, oh, this is what we do.
Episode 53 of the WildFed podcast, Beyond Race, Hunting is Human, with Martissa Williams and Rod Coleman, is brought to you by Surthrival. Surthrival's colostrum and digestive bitters are 15% off right now with the coupon code HEALTHYGUT. If you or someone you know is dealing with digestion issues ranging from indigestion to IBS to Crohn's, be sure to do the research on colostrum. I think you'll agree it's one of the most effective treatments for gut healing and digestive restoration. And remember, colostrum has been shown in clinical trials to be 3 times more effective against flu than vaccines, even in high-risk patients. Again, the coupon code is HEALTHYGUT for 15% off colostrum and other digestion support at surthrival.com. Today's episode is also brought to you by wildabundance.net. Wild Abundance offers an incredible online hide tanning course that guides aspiring hide tanners through every step of tanning a deer hide. Maybe you're a hunter wanting to utilize more of the animals you hunt, or maybe you don't hunt but have always wanted to learn to make and work with buckskin. Wild Abundance has you covered. Even if you don't have a hide, this course will teach you where to get one this fall, and they can even send you one for a small cost. The entire course is video guided, supported by written course material, live Q&As, and a community forum. The online hide tanning course is opening soon, but you need to sign up at wildabundance.net to get notified when registration opens. Go to wildabundance.net, click on online classes in the top navigation bar, and select online hide tanning to add your email address. That way you'll be first to know when registration opens. This course is awesome, and it walks you through not just tanning the hide itself, but also some craft projects to help you get started working with buckskin. Head over to wildabundance.net to sign up and to check out the great blogs on wild foods, primitive skills, and homesteading. Again, it's wildabundance.net. I'm Daniel Vitalis, and you're listening to the WildFed podcast, a show about reconnecting with nature through hunting, fishing, foraging, and food. WildFed. Food is all around you. Well, I'm feeling really blessed to get to share this episode with you today. There's 2 distinct but interrelated aspects to this conversation with Martissa Williams and Rod Coleman. First and foremost, Rod and Martissa are new hunters, and I had the honor of guiding them on their inaugural hunt. They visited Maine from New York State to spend a couple of days squirrel hunting, learning to process their kill into food, and of course, trying some of the wild game meats I had on hand to give them a taste of what they can expect if they choose to pursue hunting as a practice. For me, getting to introduce someone to hunting or any of the wild food disciplines is a pure delight. And it's core to the mission here at WildFed, which is connecting people with wildness through food. But there's another layer too, and that has to do with both race and culture. As someone who was a vegan in my 20s and later in my mid-30s chose to become a hunter, I'm pretty versed in the barriers to entry that someone might encounter when beginning their own hunting journey as an adult. At least, I thought I was. But to be honest, prior to being a guest on Martissa's show, The Naked Podcast, I hadn't really considered the unique barriers to entry that Black folks might encounter when approaching hunting as adults. While the explicit legislative prohibitions and culturally enforced proscriptions are, thankfully, no longer in place, legally or in popular culture, I really didn't have a lot of context for the way that implicit prejudices and the specter of America's past injustices still lingered and impacted the general feeling of pursuits like hunting, which, though they're a shared part of all human heritage, in modern America are rather monochromatic. So while the modern American hunting world certainly isn't in any intentional way prohibiting black people from participation, the demographics speak for themselves, and it's not hard to see how there are cultural barriers that, unless we break them down, could continue to linger as part of the cultural legacy that we are to this day, still trying and needing to heal from. What strikes me as the strangest part of this predicament is just how human the pursuit of hunting actually is. Every race, every kind of person, until only the most recent chapter in our deep human history, were hunters and came from hunters. Hunting is human. So while this is just a conversation and not any kind of real solution, I just hope, and honestly I pray, that it helps to free up some dialogue and open some eyes and minds to ways we can all contribute to the solution. Because moving forward, I want to hunt with everyone. Hunting is anthropological. It certainly isn't a white thing, or at least it shouldn't be. It's not a racial thing at all. It's the shared evolutionary and ecological food acquisition pattern of all of humankind, and anything less is beneath us as people. I'm really grateful for the North American model of conservation, which, while not perfect, gives Americans and those who visit here incredible and ample opportunities to hunt. But not every American knows it's there, how it works, or feels it's actually safely available to them. As hunters, it's time we confronted that and make sure that everyone who wants it can easily find a pathway to this ancient but still relevant human practice. So, Martissa and Rod, thank you for your visit and for opening my eyes to something I hadn't really taken the time to consider fully. You taught me a lot and left me feeling energized and excited. And in closing, while I may never adopt something so unorthodox myself, Rod, thank you for teaching me that shooting with your middle finger is a viable alternative. I have to say, my mind is blown.
Martissa, Rod, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having us.
Yeah, glad to be here.
This has been a really awesome weekend with you guys. And Grant Giuliano, producer of WildFed.
Hey guys, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Man, this has been an awesome visit. I'm really curious to hear what you guys think about Maine.
You want to start?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't have a whole lot of expectations except for a whole lot of trees.
Which we have.
Which you have.
But
definitely.
New York does too. Yeah.
It feels a lot like New York. Being upstate, it doesn't feel too different, but I think it's cool to be so intimately acquainted with the land, being able to go out and hunt and stuff.
Yeah.
So it was amazing.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. You know, I was expecting trees and hills, mountains, maybe water. And coming from upstate New York, that's what we're used to. And so being here is just, it's gorgeous. It met my expectations for sure. Even opened up my heart a lot. I was like, oh God, I think I like it here more than I thought. So I'm actually grappling that right now. Like, I didn't know I was going to love it here like this.
Could use some land in Maine. I think like we didn't get to go to like sometimes it'll be like I'm going to bring you to all the places in Maine that are to me like I want you to see. And we were really focused in, and we just had basically one full day together. Mm-hmm. You guys got here Friday, kind of late-ish, Friday evening, and then we had all day Saturday, and then today's Sunday, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So today's no hunting. So today's Sunday, and you guys got to take off. So you really only got to see like a few patches of woods, and you didn't really get to interact with that many Mainers, but the ones that you did. What do you think?
So friendly. Like, again, heart just opened because, there is the stereotype of New York that we're kind of rude, and I won't say that that's not based on something.
I don't always love the yellow and black license plates when they show up.
We have our isms, and, when you travel and you just run into a complete stranger that's just acting like they've known you, that's dope,
Especially when you have a gun.
And you're not facing 25 to life because it's not New York State.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Oh, man. What do you think?
I have no complaints. I mean, the hospitality, it almost feels like I'm in the South a little bit. With how good you all treated us here. So it feels great. I mean, I kind of feel like Rod. I'm just like, I don't know about New York. Kind of feels a little secondary at this point, which I hate to say because I do love Rochester. But I don't know. It did kind of. You guys stuck your claws in us a little bit.
Yes. I'm looking forward to having you guys out longer. Or there's so many things like after doing this squirrel hunt, which I want to talk about in a bit, but there's so many other things I would like to introduce you to. So I hope you can come back to fish, and I hope you can come back in the spring for turkeys too. It'd be really cool because there's some stuff I'd like to show you, but also love to show you around too. Gee, any thoughts about that, what we're talking about? Maine?
I'm glad you guys got to come experience it and that you're feeling like it's on par or greater than New York. Me and Daniel went to New York recently, and we got to fall in love with New York, and we always had like it's New York.
Yeah.
So it's cool.
And then we did fall in love with the place.
Yeah, so it's cool to have that reciprocal feeling about each other's home.
But it's a place where you're like, wait, what's the gun laws? And what's the cannabis laws?
Oh,
yeah.
we don't talk about that. We don't talk about that.
But it's pretty amazing. This is a best kept little secret of the country, I feel like. Yeah. I have had people say to me, like, Maine, is that in the United States? You're like, come on, you know? Or I've said, I was in LA one time, I was like, yeah, I'm from New England. And the woman's like, wow, you just don't really like have an accent. I was like, no, not England, New England.
No, but there's a heavy New England accent.
Yeah, for sure. But she was looking for like a British accent, I think.
No.
Like she wasn't understanding New England was part, LA's the whole world. So Martissa, we first met, you reached out about having me on your podcast.
Yep.
And so maybe we'll start there, because that was how we connected. And you said some things to me that I was like, you should come to Maine and hunt then, because I was like kind of blown away. I had stuff I hadn't been on my radar, before. So tell us about your podcast and then sort of our conversation, and we'll kind of pick up there.
I was really grateful to be able to have you, and my listeners were infinitely grateful to have you, because it's this the hunter-gatherer piece, with my podcast being a little bit of a hodgepodge of all things wellness and justice and where those
What's
things
the name
meet. The Naked Podcast. And I feel like it was amazing because being able to have a perspective that a little city girl from Detroit would never. My mom still looks at me crazy even this weekend being here with you. She's like, y'all did what? And did you shoot what? And there's this kind of whole disconnect from this world. So it's been really amazing to have had your information and get into some of what it looks like to be a wild human, and a human that's actually connected to the landscape. But yeah, so I mean, it was I feel like we had a great conversation, and I would highly recommend any of your listeners to go over and listen to it, because I feel
if
like
you want to see me the most nervous you've ever, or hear me the most nervous, because you said like wellness and justice. And right now is this time in history when I hear justice, I'm like, I'm about to get a talking to. That's usually what it means. It's like, it makes me really nervous. But then I was like, I love taboo stuff, It's like, oh, there's a chance here to tear into something. Because I've been watching these conversations play out on the, nationwide spotlight about race in America and all this stuff, and social justice in general. And there's so much I want to say. Because I have opinions too, and I'm a person who talks for a living. But I was nervous, and then and tiptoeing a lot. But now that we've got to spend some time, when you came out here, it was awesome. It was like, oh wow, I feel like a really natural flow of conversation. And last night we had some conversations that I feel like we got into territory that it's like, wish this stuff was being talked about.
Most definitely. At
a bigger level. But one of the things you said to me, my point bringing it up, was what stood out to me the most was you made a comment about being in the woods with white people with guns. And I just had never thought about that before. And I was like, well, then come do that.
Right.
What does that mean, So can you kind of like tell me what that means exactly? Because I feel like that's it's not a thing where people are like, it's not a thing where as a hunter, I'm like thinking about who's allowed to hunt and who's not allowed to hunt. It's just sort of how it is. I just came into it, you know what I mean? And then it's like, oh, well, if that's going on, we got to change that,
Absolutely. I mean, I think to illustrate it, well, just for the listeners, since you don't see us, Rod and I are black. If you didn't gather that just yet, Rod and I are black. And so in our kind of cultural heritage, at least in the last, let's say about 50 years, black folks hunting almost seems like an oxymoron. Even though historically that's not particularly true. When you start talking to the elders, they're like, oh no, my uncle was out there, my stepdad was telling me about the squirrels he's eaten and all that kind of stuff. So, but in the last, I would say 50 years, it's really been that's not a part of our culture.
Probably particularly in the northern tier of the United States, right?
Right.
The South, it's a little different.
Yeah.
My family, fresh out of the South, and so down there, I have more relatives that have had experience hunting. My ex and their family, they were humongous hunters, and they're from Mississippi. So I definitely would say it's also
more of a northern thing.
Northern where we're from, especially where I'm from in New York. There's a lot of hunters, but I never, and I grew up in a very rural area. I never met a black hunter.
Yeah.
Was not a thing. And anytime I talked about it, there's even some jokes made about, me going out there with people. And so there was a cultural barrier for sure. Even, I guess, and optically cultural.
Yeah,
right.
that's a good point.
Yeah, because there's not like actual. This is where one of the things that I think has been really interesting in what we've talked about is there's things where there are these barriers that they're not legal barriers. They're not enforced prohibition barriers.
Right.
They're cultural barriers that haven't been dissolved before.
Yeah.
And then when you see them, it's kind of like, oh, well, that'd be easy to dissolve.
Right.
But if you don't see them, then you don't know. And it takes willingness on both sides of that too, right? Like, I would have never have thought about it, except you said it. And then it was like, well, then come do it. Because, then it was easy to see what to do next, I guess.
But what's also interesting is like, it is cultural for sure. But then it's funny how culture gets imprinted on our nervous system.
Yeah.
Because I have to say, like, coming up here, and we had an amazing conversation. I felt there was a connection. And that was why I was like, yeah, fuck it. I'm going to come out to Maine and meet this man I've never met and hunt with him in the woods. And like, that would mean to my family, that was really scary, especially in this moment and climate and things like that.
Be specific. Like something would happen to you?
Like, yes. Okay. So for example, spoiler alert to when we talk about the hunt later, but yesterday when we were stopped by those
that's
folks.
What I was going to say.
Yeah. And he's like, you have permission here. My heart stopped in a lot of ways because I was like, oh shit, like this could go left really quick. Like if it was just Rod and I out there, that could have been a complete, that outcome could have happened completely
So we
different.
were all on the same page in that moment.
Yeah.
You felt that as well?
What I saw was the potential for the nightmare scenario.
Yeah.
And I saw the potential for like a beautiful scenario. Man, I almost want to cry talking about this. Because I looked at that guy. He was aggressive at first with us.
Right.
So for the listeners, we'll get to it. But this ATV pulled up. And in Maine, we have different hunting laws. You are assumed to have permission to be on property until you've been told otherwise or it's posted. No trespassing, no hunting. So we started on our friend's place where we went. Met some friends of ours and punched into the woods there. But we ended up on another tract of land following these squirrels around. And this ATV, a side-by-side, pulls up. And obviously 2 white people in it. And they pull up and it's like, it looks just like exactly how you would stereotypically imagine it going wrong.
Right. Yeah.
Especially with the ATV thing, It's like how it's like, here we go. And the guy yells out, hey, do you have permission to be here? And we're all dressed in orange, so we're very obviously standing there.
Aiming,
right.
And we're close enough that I'm like, okay, he can see us all. How's this going to play out? So I walk over and he was sort of aggressive till I got to the ATV, and then he was so cool.
Right.
And he goes, listen, I can't actually give you permission to be here, but I'm not going to tell you to leave. Because he's like, the people who own this land, he was a caretaker. People who own this land don't like hunting. But look, I don't care. Just don't shoot in this direction, shoot in this direction.
Yeah.
And then they drove off, and I was like, beautiful scenario. Because then I was like, you guys get to see that this place isn't like that.
Yeah.
But I was nervous about that.
It was an interesting experience for sure.
I didn't speak on my feels on that, but in the moment, a fire started burning inside me of anger. Because I can't tell you how many times I've had situations.
Before we actually had the permission?
When he first pulled up and started yelling to us. Short anecdote, I had a situation picking up my ex's little sister in Mississippi, and a stranger comes up to the car, puts a gun to my head and says, you're supposed to be here, you look lost.
Whoa.
And
wow.
I had the same rage that I had that day of like, first off, how dare you question me and being here? What did I do to you? What am I doing to you? But for me yesterday, it was, you already had told me the hunting laws here in Maine and that it's assumed. And he I don't want to say he looked like a hunter, but I mean, if you're out in the woods with an ATV, I'm assuming
an orange hat on.
Yeah.
You know, I'm assuming you know a little bit about, you know, the laws here. So how dare you ask that question? So then I'm thinking, why are you asking that question? And then I'm thinking, I'm a 6-foot black guy with dreadlocks, you know, wearing hunter orange, you know, you saw me. So, you know, I'm like, why are you asking these questions? Go about your day. And, you know, while you were talking, all I could do was just fill in my brain with like good stuff. I was like, it's not what I'm thinking. You know, you know, just because like, it's easy to believe in the negative, but I'm really at the point in my life where I can't keep feeding myself that type of stuff. I want to grow. And I'm just like, okay, he's not going to be evil. He's not racist. He's really genuinely concerned about something important, and this is going to go well. And, you know, things did go well.
I mean, he didn't say anything. I mean, all he said, he wanted me to know that this land belonged to these people who are anti-hunters. And I'll just say, and I think Grant would validate this, we've had that exact experience when it's just us out in the woods. The way he acted was the way that almost always goes down.
If it was just me and Daniel, he would have done the same thing, I think.
Yeah,
because it's more like I'm the caretaker and there's who are you hunting here?
At the same time, when he pulled up, that like at first when Daniel told me that you were scared of coming out into the woods hunting with white people, I was like, really? And then
I don't say she was scared, but she mentioned it.
Right. Like, it's something that you were worried about maybe.
Right.
And I was like, huh. And then when that ATV pulled up, I was like,
you felt it. But see, and that's really beautiful. I mean, because I think there's always, and I've been talking about connection this entire weekend, but there's this opportunity to have deep empathy. Like where before, if you and I had never met, you would just be going about your day, not really thinking about the different nuances and thoughts that, you know, different people have because of different circumstances.
And it can evoke defensiveness.
Right.
Where it'd be like, that's not how it is.
Right.
So being together gave us the opportunity, because in that moment I saw the potential for how that could have happened,
right,
if we had been dealing with a different type of person,
right.
And then it's like, oh fuck, that's what she,
I
usually swear on my own show. I was like, oh, that's what that's about.
Yeah,
and I have never had the opportunity to experience it like that.
I also think it's interesting, like being black in America, which we talked about this a little last night, but like, you're not, it's like historically you were never wanted, like in a way that you were very clearly wanted for a specific reason, but everything else you weren't. There's a feeling of never being wanted, never being in the right space, never being able to like actually relax and let your hair down in a lot of ways. So there is an innate like defensiveness, survival mechanism that says like, oh shoot, like what does he want? And that's what I love that you said, Rod, about being like, you have to move past, like you kind of have to move past that and be like, I want to envision a world that's safer for me to live in.
But you need to have experiences that confirm that too,
Right.
which we did. I was like, when I walked away from like, oh cool, it's a confirmation of a welcoming. You know, it's only one, so it's not like, no, there you go, everything's better. But it's like, it's a confirmation, which is good to have it like in your checklist, you know, like, okay, it went well.
Most definitely. I want to piggyback off that a tad bit. And reference, you know, some of the things we talked about yesterday, if that's cool.
Yeah, please.
Because I think these are conversations that need to be heard. And, you know, so what Martissa just said about, like, not being wanted, I would add to that, like, not being wanted outside of your, air quotes, purpose. And let's be honest and realistic about how our families got here. And it wasn't by choice. And so our original purpose was as slaves and as workers. And then we were delegated a couple roles. I mean, I'm not going to go through all of American history just for the sake of time, but we were delegated a couple roles within society, and we wanted to stay there. As everyone knows, we didn't stay there. We were like, we want rights, we want them now, and that's what we're still hearing to this day. And so you got to remember that if you're listening to this and you're not African American, this is me sharing this perspective, you know, to get some insight on like why this population thinks the way we do. Well, we were raised by people that are the descendants of the reality of why we're in America, and they've been treated X, Y, and Z.
And it's, I mean, not really that long ago.
Not at all.
Talking about big history all the time, 300,000 years of human evolution, you know, all this like deep history. When you start talking about a couple hundred years, I mean, it's like you're talking like the Band-Aid's still on. It's really, really fresh.
I mean, my stepfather, he was he didn't go to an integrated school until kind of late in his academic, journey. And, so that's one generation.
I mean, and you told the story of you being in Mississippi and that man putting a gun to your head.
Yeah,
and being like,
and so it's like we're not far removed from the things that you see on black and white and TV, or you see black and white photos of, and I make comments that like when you put some of those photos in color, it gives it this different perspective because it's like, oh, this is real. This isn't this super old thing. But saying it to say, like there's a reason for these beliefs that, some may disagree with, that may have not experienced some of these things. And so when we say like something that maybe is jarring as like, oh, we were afraid to go into the woods with, some clearly friendly people, there's like, let's think about it for a second.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What can go wrong if you actually hate me and I go into the woods with you?
But no, I don't want to think about it, Ron.
it's uncomfortable.
And it's necessary to stop avoiding the uncomfortable conversations to create compassion, to create room for compassion, because that's inevitably what happened with all of us in this trip together. Is we stepped out of our own comfort zones in some ways. We went into this podcast that was centered around justice, and you're like, ooh, this could be rough. But then there was room for compassion, and you're like, here's me offering this, and we're like, ooh, this could be rough. And then we step into it, and then there's compassion shown, and we got to know each other and see each other's humanities in beautiful ways, which I'm sure we're gonna get to. And that the key though is not staying in your comfort zone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Is if, I had said at home and I like video games, I could have just been like, nah, man, I'll just download a hunting game and get my experience like that, please. Well, where would I have grown?
We wouldn't have any squirrel to eat when we finished, right?
Yeah, exactly. My life is way richer today than it was a few days ago because I got like more stuff to think about in a couple of days than I have in a couple of years, to be honest. I mean, I'm deeply moved because you guys were willing to have conversations with, like last night, there was that point where I was like, look, I got like 6 or 7 questions. I just got to get them out there, and you given me such a huge gift this weekend. So I really appreciate that. So you guys showed up here to change the subject. You guys showed up here to a squirrel meal. And I loved, Martissa, you had said you would talk to, who were you talking to?
My stepdad.
Your stepdad?
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about, because initially you were like, yeah, I'd love to come up there hunting. Can we go deer hunting? And I was like, man, it's not realistic, And now what's cool about what we did is you've got to do the full cycle all the way, which would have been, if we had a deer to butcher, it'd be cooler still. We'd never have gotten to it. So I suggested squirrels, and you were kind of like, well, okay. So pick it up from there, I guess.
I never really thought about eating a rodent. Like that was never really part of my thought process. But I'm pretty much a person that will try almost anything once at least, and so I'm like telling my parents, and my mom was like, absolutely not. Like, it won't be me. I won't be tasting it. I won't be trying it. And my dad is like, oh no, squirrel is bomb. My grandmother used to fry it up and smother it and do all these things. And I was like, oh, so this is like a thing. And he was like really, really selling me on it. So my heart started to open to the idea of it. And then once we got here and I watched you prepare it a little bit and put it on, and I'm looking at it and I'm like, okay, and tasted it, and it just, I've never really had anything like
pretty
it.
Good,
like it's really, really amazing.
Yeah, what do you think about that?
Man, I came in and I shared with you before all this started, and I was so anxious and embarrassed to say this, but I was like, I love squirrels from the most juvenile perspective. Like, I think that they're these cute little fuzzy thiggies that jump from tree to tree, and they're so nimble. I was like, oh,
well, they are. That's all true.
And, yes,
right?
it is very true. Yeah. And I like through this, my relationships evolved so deep. I still love them, just in a much more like involved way, I would say. But coming here, I was like, man, I don't know if I can kill a squirrel. I love them so much, and then I got to eat it. Oh man, like. And then so I had my own softening process that looked more of just like inserting a little bit of like logic and reasoning into that on top of my emotional draw. But then when I eat it. Oh my breath! Like I'm a food guy through and through.
Okay.
Like cooking is actually one of my love languages. Like I love to experiment with food, and I love to give people
you did tell me that this weekend. Good to know.
Yeah, I did so much talking. So, but yeah, cooking for me is deep. And when I tasted it, my mind just expanded with all these possibilities for that flavor, and even beer pairings. And I was like,
oh yeah,
okay, I'm ready. I'm ready. I'm like, New York, we got a lot of squirrels, so let's do this. And yeah, it was bomb.
That's funny because I said to Grant, we were sort of trying to plan the weekend out, and it was like, okay, I should feed them squirrel right off the bat, right when they get here, because if they're not convinced going out squirrel hunting, I think you might have had, because you guys took to it so fast. It was like, I showed you a couple things, and then it was like, you guys were like, knew exactly what you were doing, and you were very goal oriented, very into it, and which was awesome to watch. But I was thinking that might not happen if you were still trepidatious about them as a food.
Like, why am I even out here right now?
Right.
Yeah.
Like, why would I kill this thing? It's so cute, But knowing that they're good eating. And that was, I think, 6 or 7 squirrels that we ate that night. And that was quite a feed. We were 5 people, right? All of us and my wife and Bonnie.
I took some back.
And you ended up taking some leftovers home to your girlfriend. So, yeah, so that's like, it doesn't take too many before they're like a significant meal. And when you're not 4 people moving through the woods, it's easier to get to them than we experienced this being a hunting party. But
Yeah.
You got anything you want to add about any of that, G?
I don't think so.
Okay, so we ate squirrel the first day, and then we sat up all night just talking.
Yeah.
Man, we had a conversation. You guys all went to bed finally, because we knew we had to get up in the morning, and Ivani was just like, I don't want to go to bed. I want to keep having this conversation. That was so fun. So we just had a great connection. I mean, I was blown away at how deep we were going.
Yeah, me too. I got home, Kendall was basically asleep, and I was like, Kendall, I have to tell you.
Oh, man.
Yeah, so we just all really hit it off. And then the next morning, we had initially thought you'd be here earlier Friday, and I was going to have you guys shoot the 22 and just get comfortable with that gun. But because it was later, it was already dark out, and I didn't want to wake up at 6 a.m. and go shoot in my backyard and wake up my neighborhood or whatever. So blessed to live in a place where I can shoot in my backyard, but I do try to be respectful of houses in the general area and stuff for their sleep and whatnot. So we decided we'd just go out and I'd hunt and you guys would be with me. And then I think that worked pretty good because you got to see what it looks like. And we actually didn't even I took one shot. That's right. So we had only saw one squirrel in that area.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And I ended up getting a shot. You guys were behind me a little bit, took the shot, and I had a failure to fire. So a bad round. And so, and as you guys know, if the squirrel's moving, they usually only pause long enough for you to press the trigger and then they're gone again. So that was the only opportunity. But you got to see what I was doing. You got to see what the squirrels were like, how different they are than the ones that you see in a suburban, urban, or park type environment.
Yeah.
Say something about it.
They are, and so again, me being a squirrel fan, I'm a people watcher. I'm a window watcher, really. Yeah. I love to sit out and just watch nature do its thing. And, like a city squirrel or like a park squirrel, they're very almost personable. Like they're just going to come up, they're going to do their thing. They're going to grab whatever they're grabbing. They might chill, look at you for a second. You get too close, they scurry off. These wild squirrels, no, they have all their instincts still intact, and they are much more clever than I could have ever fathomed, and they know how to use their bodies to protect themselves, to hide, to obviously to climb. And so all of that nimble agility that I just thought was cute, I got to see it in its arena of use, in its space of operation. And when I say I have a newfound respect for squirrels, it's like from seeing them in this habitat, in this situation, they're there.
Yeah.
But when they don't want you to know they're there, they are damn good at doing that.
Right. Somebody said to Grant the other day, I don't remember what provoked it. Oh, it was we had filmed a little segment we put up actually just before you guys arrived. We had posted this little story. I think we called it Undressing Squirrels. Or Squirrels Undressed.
Gray Squirrels Undressed.
And it's just a breakdown video. It wasn't like a how-to as much as a little montage type
Which is
video.
what we ate the first night you got
those
here.
squirrels, yeah.
Oh,
exactly. So I was processing those squirrels we ate. And I have that, what's it called, Holtzhausen? Holtzhausen. That big wood pile that's in the round shape outside. We processed them right on there. And when I watched the video, sometimes I notice colors differently when I watch them than when I'm actually in them. And for the first time, I was like, man, there's a lot of trees are gray. I always think of, if like you gave a kid a crayon box and you said, draw a tree, it's going to be like a brown trunk with a green top, but they're gray. And so it's interesting because you would think, why would you be a gray squirrel? That's not going to work too good. With the red squirrels, it's like they're in the pine all the time. And those needles on the ground turn that orange color. They're orange. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Why would you be gray? And then you see them against a tree trunk and you're
and
like,
they're
oh,
gone.
they're camouflaged.
Right.
When I was filming that, I was like getting a little frustrated because it's like hard to distinguish the squirrel from the
gray
bark.
Scales. Yeah. And then do you remember, Rod, the first night, I think it was you were telling us, look, like, I'm just going to be honest. Here's how I feel about squirrels. And I think I pitched you something like, I think if you go through with this, you're going to know squirrels even deeper.
That was such good foreshadowing because that was, and it was powerful for me because like it kept my mind open during the hunt as well. And I was observing it as, it's kind of like how I'm trying to choose to see humans. I'm trying to see you for humanity. So I'm seeing this squirrel for its squirrelness, like instead of this anthropomorphized version of a squirrel that I've had in my brain for so long. It's a gymnast. No, it's a squirrel, and it's perfect at what it does. And that's you giving me that little piece helped me to open up to view it through this time. And to really take it in a much different way. And you hit the nail on the head. Like I definitely did get to know this animal in a different way by seeing it in this light.
Man, then we came back here. So we went out and we hunted for a while, and then we came back to the house and we were going to shoot. And I know you guys had shot a bit at the range, and you had some background shooting. I put out a target. I get the 22, like a little Ruger 1022. We had a couple of them, so that's what we were bringing. And we go to set up, and then Rod, as he usually does before anything you do, he pulls you aside and goes, look, I got to tell you something weird. He goes, when I shoot, I press the trigger with my middle finger. And I was like, come on. Like, what are you talking about? You can't use your middle finger. No, I was like, all right, I've never seen it, but let's see what happens. So I shot just to demo, and I had this little... I gave you guys a tough shooting standard, a 1.5-inch red square at 25 yards. We want to keep everything inside that little 1.5-inch square. So I shoot and fill up that red square. And then I think you went next.
I was next, yeah.
And you shot so good. I was like, great, this is great, And I was like, let's see how middle finger guy does, though. And then he shoots this ultra tight group, right?
So
Tighter
tight.
than both of our groups.
Yeah.
So we all did some great shooting, but I was like, okay, your middle finger thing works great, man. I'm sold. That was really funny to me, though.
Share that with the viewers, man.
Shooting with the middle finger.
For my own defense, because I have to say it, like my brother served in the military, like how I explained to you, but he's a preemie, and his index finger is just shorter than the rest of his fingers. And so when he learned how to shoot, he was cleared to shoot with his middle finger and stabilize with his index finger. And when he came home, he taught me the same things, and he taught me what he knew. And this man was one of the best shots in his group. So I learned to use my index finger to stabilize whatever weapon, if it's a handgun or if it's a rifle, and it also feels like I'm pointing down at my target. And so when I'm lining up my shot, things that you point at, it's just something intuitive about knowing where it's going.
Oh, yeah.
And
that's a big thing in sports physiology, is like, or psychology, is like pointing as an aiming mechanism when you throw something.
Yeah, and so it is goofy as it sounds. You guys can all quietly try it. You don't even have to let me know how it goes, but if you choose to let me know how it goes, I already know the result. You're going to shoot great.
I'm a middle finger shooter.
You shoot a handgun that way too?
Yeah, I know it sounds goofy, but
it doesn't sound goofy. It's just unorthodox. Because when I shoot a handgun, both my thumbs are on the left side of the frame and slide, and they're both pointing but also stabilizing that side of the gun, so it makes sense that you could then stabilize the other side with your index finger. It's just a convention.
Yeah, but ingenuity, man.
Yeah.
Or innovation.
Well,
that's what
I was sold. Yeah, that was funny, man. I really got a kick out of that. So then we headed out again to hunt for the afternoon. I think by the time we even decided to go out on that hunt, we knew the ticks were bad. That's one of the tough things when you bring people out to Maine and you're like, it's tick season. Because right now we're in the second tick season of the year. You're only seeing black-legged ticks, so what we sometimes call deer ticks, which are the ones that transmit Lyme disease, babesia, and what else do? They do all the baddies. Powassan, yeah. They carry all these different diseases. We also have the dog tick, some people call the wood tick, which is a bigger tick, more common than the one that you see on dogs.
Basically harmless, right?
They carry diseases, but they don't seem to transmit them to people almost ever. So anyway, those ones are easier to find, and they're less scary. But this is the scary tick season, and they were just ferocious. We were finding them all over us, and I just felt, like I said to you guys today, I don't want you to take that away as like a good memory of Maine. But again, you're like, well, I'm just telling you. Rod's like, I'm wearing Under Armour real tight. They're not gonna get to me. And again, I gotta say, I'm gonna be shooting with my middle finger and wearing tight Under Armour. You weren't getting them on.
Yeah, I out of the entire group, I got home and I let out a good yell when I checked for ticks. I was like, let's go, because everyone else had a bunch of them, and I'm the the lone individual that first checked. We were all good.
You found one on you later?
Yeah,
we know it came from you.
Convinced that you gave him,
because we're all sitting around talking, and it was on. I had like part of my sleeve rolled up, and it just was on my hand.
Yeah,
and I'm like, okay, wait a minute, like. It was
from
just,
whence did he come?
Yeah, and I felt it moving.
It on you.
I knew it.
But then you took it off and you threw it on the floor. We were like, no!
And my brain didn't think for literally a second. It was like, get off. Like, don't like
no,
him.
where is it? And Martissa, you came up with that one on your belly. That thing was...
It was getting in there,
it was
for
starting
sure.
to dig in a little bit. That was so funny because Grant yanks it off for you, and then you go down the stairs, and I hear you go like...
I was trying to be strong in front of y'all, and then I forgot that the walls are thin. So
It's so good. Oh, I totally get it. Yeah, Avani, when she first moved down here from Canada, which is like north of the tick invasion. So I remember a day where I sent her out to pick strawberries, and I came in. She called me to come home, and she had them just all up her leg, and they were all kind of like that one on you, just starting to bite.
Yeah.
But man, I was on the phone with her. I was like, just pull them off. She's like, I can't. They're attached. And I got home, and it was just like click, 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 click. But they're pretty weird at first. So then we went out hunting, and then it was like, okay, you guys shoot. And I think we walked right up to the wood line, and there was that squirrel there. Rod, tell that story.
Yeah, went out there, open mind, open eyes. I think one thing that's important as a beginner to hunting to realize is how you're focused, but you're open. It's such an odd type of focus. You're mindful is the word that we've been using for the weekend. So I walk up and I'm just like letting my eyes see the landscape. And following you on the hunt kind of taught me how to distinguish natural movements of trees with like animal movements of trees. So my eyes were catching birds and squirrels at this point. And, we were lucky enough that one of the first patches of trees that we came up on, I see a squirrel. And so I give you like this little sign like, hey, I see one. And that's when the hunt got real.
And I was like, you go after it, dude. I felt really confident after. Because we also did some shooting, but then before we left, we practiced some positions using trees as a brace for the gun too, so that you had that stability so you don't have to freehand shoot.
Yeah.
So we had practiced that, and I was like, all right, you guys understood. So it was really simple. So it was like, just go for it.
Most def. And that's, essentially what ended up happening. It was, you had shown me a trick with using the strap.
The sling,
to stabilize the shot. And so I got up against a tree and I used the strap.
And basically for listeners, it's like you slide your arm in between the sling and the gun and then drop your elbow and armpit down into it, and the sling just tightens up against your body, and it makes that gun like lock into you. Yeah.
And it gave me a lot of stability. I had a little bit of experience of practicing with it, beforehand, like you had said. And I just remember lining up that shot, and my brain went on overload for a tenth of a millisecond. And in that time, though, everything moves really slow. And my brain was like, don't mess this up. Don't mess this up.
This is the first animal you have shot, right?
Correct.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And I was like, I know how quick these are. I know I only have a moment to take this shot. He's standing still right now. Don't know if he sees us or what's going on. And I felt like I turned off the voice in my head that was saying that and turned on the part of my brain that was like, you're a good shot. As soon as you line it up, pull that freaking trigger, and you're gonna get it. And I lined it up. I felt like I had a good shot. I knew how to control my breathing in that moment to get a real steady shot. And literally, as soon as I felt like just the slightest bit comfortable, I pulled the trigger, and I was like, I know it was a good shot, and that squirrel dropped. Yeah. It felt good. But that was I'll be honest, that was a completely different lane shift. After the trigger was pulled, my brain went to a whole different space.
What did it go to?
Realizing I just shot an animal, and so coming into it, I was on the fence of, am I a hunter? I've heard stories from people, honestly, that on their first hunt, they cry when they take an animal, and some people don't return to hunting.
Yeah.
And I know I'm at a point in my life right now where I've opened my heart up a lot. I've become more compassionate and empathetic than I've ever been. And so I was like, is this going to hurt me? And, I pulled the trigger and I was like, oh, shoot, I did it. But then it didn't feel like murder.
Yeah. Right.
Like, I knew why I was there. I mean, I had eaten squirrel.
Squirrel knew why you were there too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I felt like I was a part of the circle of life. And, I also knew that, like, I was blessed to have this bounty. And that was actually something that I had prayed for before we went out. And, I may not be the biggest prayer in the world, I will say that, but I do have a great spiritual belief that, kind of runs my life. And I had prayed that, if I am blessed to be in a situation where I have a shot, that it is a shot that's a kill shot, and I can stay in alignment with nature, in that, I'll be able to also take this food into my body, and, it becomes a part of me because that's just digestion. That's what it is. And, everything else returns to nature, and, the squirrel's life was heralded in a way. And, everything that was prayed for, that happened. Yeah. And, it was the medicine in that moment, because I was like, oh shit, I'm here, I'm out here. I'm a predator seeking prey, and not a monster. Yeah, right.
I guess that's what went wrong with me, because I didn't pray before. I should have got down on my knees too.
Yeah. Next time. So the thing though, so all of that said, like, when your squirrel came out of the tree, I remember he's like holding on, and then like one hand lets go, then the other hand, then he was just hanging by 1 foot, and then it was like one claw lifted at a time, falls to the ground, and he's bucking his body trying to get forward, but his nervous system's not working. He's trying to get forward, and he's thrashing around. Now sometimes you take a shot and it's just they're dead, and other times they get away, wounded, or you didn't hit them, they get away, or sometimes that happens. And I was kind of glad that happened, so you could see it, because that's, I think, a thing that you need to be prepared for, is that it's not like in the movies, you get shot and you're dead. It's like, because I think about that too with people, because you see in the movies, almost people get punched in the face and they're unconscious. It's like, it doesn't really work like that. Not most of the time. And, they get shot in the shoulder, they're dead right away. It's like, man, you're alive for a while. As long as blood's still getting to the brain, you're still alive. So you kind of got to see that process. It's a little gnarly,
Yeah. And so a tiny bit of background on who I am. I work in EMS right now, and I've gone to calls where patients have been lost. And that is a very personal experience that I'm not going to dive into right now. It's way too deep. But to see it in a human, it creates a relationship with what life really is, and like really what the body does too. And because I've seen, hemorrhagic shock, I've seen organ failure, I've seen a bunch of different ways that a body can stop functioning. And so when I saw it with the squirrel, it wasn't this deeply foreign thing. It was just a different vessel. And I still was very shocked, because like I said, I knew when I pulled the trigger that I either hit it in the head or in the neck. Like I knew that there was not a lot of range of error in that shot that I took.
Floating.
Yeah. And so I was surprised when it was thrashing the way it did. I was like, oh. Yeah, it was a little bit of a shock, but less about Yeah, I guess they're just like, you don't think that there's still going to be... I haven't seen a human die in the way that this squirrel died. So you just weren't... I wasn't personally expecting the amount of movement that was still left after the shot, because it entered between the eyes and the skull, correct?
Yep.
And then exited out
It kind of like blew out the back half of the other side of the face a little bit.
And so when we came
Looked pretty lethal.
it was a decent shot. So I was just like, holy crap, like you had that much fight left in you. And again, it's a testament to what we said.
And there was a lot, like you being in EMS, you understand hypovolemic shock. Like when you have no blood volume, you can't get blood up to the head.
Yeah.
So seeing how much blood there was on the ground, it was like you really understand whatever wildness is. Man, it's amazing the fight that is in a living thing to get away even in the last moments. It's really impressive.
We'll get back to the interview in a moment, but first, WildFed is proud to be sponsored by our good friends over at Red Kill Mountain Homestead Farms. I've been telling you about the incredible wild apple savanna at Red Kill in upstate New York and the wild apples they offer in their apple boxes and their apple cleanse. But I want to take a moment to tell you about the apple molasses they produce as well. Apple molasses, which is also known as cider syrup, is made by reducing apple cider until it's a thick, syrup-like sweetener. Historically, this was a common sweetener throughout the apples range, particularly on homesteads that had apple trees. But today, it's actually listed as an endangered food by Slow Food USA's Arc of Taste. Incredibly, Red Kill Mountain is one of only 3 commercial producers still offering apple molasses to the public. Red Kill Mountain's apple molasses is the pure, concentrated terroir of their wild savanna, with rich caramel notes and hints of copper and slate, and of course that bright apple flavor too. It's great on breakfast foods like pancakes and oatmeal, savory dishes like roasted vegetables, and it pairs perfectly with meats like beef, pork, duck, or venison. You can even drizzle it on a charcuterie plate to wow your guests, and add it to water to make a reconstituted cider. Remember, the apples at Red Kill Mountain are wild fruits. They've never been grafted, sprayed, or irrigated. They're truly a gift of nature, and the apple molasses from Red Kill Mountain is the concentrated expression of that wildness. Remember, apple molasses makes a great gift too, and the coupon code WildFed20 gets you 20% off your entire order at redkillmountainhomesteadfarms.com. Now, back to the show.
So your squirrel is on the ground, and that immediately reveals the second squirrel. So I'm like, great, Martissa, you're up.
Yeah.
So hand you the gun, and I think we threw a hat down to mark where your squirrel was so we could come back. And
so we had seen 2 squirrels in that tree.
Yeah, that's it. And we were looking at different squirrels, and then when yours was shot, the other one is revealed, and you go chasing after it. So I'll let you pick it up there.
Yeah. That squirrel immediately took off into the trees, and we ran up, chased it, and gosh, like watching it see us and want to be as away from us as possible was really incredible to watch. Like, because Daniel, you and I are like essentially like running around the tree, not literally running, but like moving and maneuvering around the tree over and over again, trying to figure out how to get the perfect shot on him. But he decided he was going to curl right into a ball as tight as he could in between 2 branches. So there was never like a real good shot on him.
We could see him, but we couldn't get a target, right? It was like tail fluff, and you're like, I don't even know what body part that is.
Right.
We just kept, like you said,
circling around. And then at some point, I think actually we decided to go back and get Rod's squirrel. And once we got back to him, he was laid out on a branch. Just like
we picked him up, just perfect side view.
But it was funny because this is where some of the spiritual stuff for me comes in, is he watched. Like he knew we were there, was looking at me as I was setting up my shot, looking at him in the scope. It was as if we were staring eye to eye.
Yeah, you're looking right through that scope into his eye.
Exactly. And it was like almost as if he's like, okay, I'm done fighting.
Yeah.
And he's just sat right there. And took a few moments, more than a few moments, to try and set up that shot and get a good shot on him. And I took it, and it looked like it got him. Yeah. It looked like he got him. But next thing you know, he lurched and then ran down the tree as if nothing had happened.
Totally like physically moving like perfectly.
Yeah.
Not like he's injured.
Nothing.
But it was so weird because I was like, you hit him. I saw him respond to being hit.
Right.
So I was not expecting what happened next, which was the way he took off.
He was out. And I mean, and we were grateful to have the footage later because we were all sitting there like, what happened?
It looks like you hit him in the ear.
Yes. Yeah.
Which is a cool story because it's so survivable.
Yeah. He's like this gangster squirrel that
right.
like a little chip off his ear.
The way his ear just in the video just folds down. It looks like, or it just gets knocked down. Yeah, so not laughing at his injury, but I mean, Absolutely. It was that thing of like, is he got a broken arm or shoulder or something lethal, but he's going to live a long time.
Yeah.
So it was kind of nice later to review that.
Yeah.
But you had the different experience because Rod had the like really still squirrel, and aside from that one moment, which I mean, it's just like a fraction of an inch high, I guess, really that caused that. After that, you just were chasing squirrels that were on the move all day. We just spent the rest of the day like chasing squirrels.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And by then, Rod's already in like another level of hunter. I'm noticing, like, because I'd turn around and he's got the 1,000-yard stare.
Yeah.
And he's just like 2 over there, 4 over there. One's going up that tree, one's down low. Did you guys see the one over here? And I'm just like, oh man, this guy's got it already. He's like hooked in deep. You had a very interesting look on your face, like that look of somebody who's taking in a really big vista. And by contrast, because you and I, Martissa, were just running around like, over here, we're over here, we're over here, we're over here, we're over here. And then we'd get done whatever little moment, and Rob would be like, did you guys see the 2 that went?
I know. I mean, both of us are so frustrated. We're like, what, really, bro?
And I knew I was like, I would sit there with a pit in my stomach. I'm like, they're going to be pissed. And I'm like, but in the same vein, like, you know, we're out there, we're whispering. My mom says I have an Irish whisper. So I'm really, you know, and anyone doesn't know what that means, it just means I can't talk quiet. Like this deep voice travels.
I noticed that you weren't whispering. You would just talk in your normal voice.
Because I don't have a...
Yeah, you'd start to whisper and be like, it's not working.
Yeah, and I'd be like, well, maybe I'm talking quiet. Like, I don't know. And so, you know, we're about 15, 20 meters from each other. For me, so this talking voice that you hear now works when people are about 4 feet away from me. After that, you're not going to hear me unless I use my diaphragm. And everything in the forest would then have heard us.
Right.
And so I'm like, do I just yell squirrels? And I'm just like, they're gonna scream at me if I do that. So maybe they'll be less mad if they find out about the shot they didn't get to take.
Well, I was glad to see that you were using that time to deepen your connection to the whole process, because I felt like, okay, he's like dialed into it now, and you and I we chased a lot of squirrels.
We chased so many squirrels, and then the story of
the ATV.
The ATV.
Because at that point, we had found some squirrels pretty far away. Mm-hmm. But that was like a great situation because they were just feeding in the trees and chasing each other around, and they were pretty unaware of us, pretty oblivious to us.
Yeah, for sure.
So you stalked in. I was behind you.
Yeah, and we were, because we were a little bit a ways, and we got up and got a little close and tried to set up a shot, and it was taking forever because those squirrels, they literally didn't know that we were there, so they were just having fun running through. There's 3 of them,
knocking acorns down from the tree branches and stuff.
Yeah, it never really took a good moment to actually sit and eat. Like we were kind of just waiting for them to sit down and take a bite, but they were just kind of moving on the go, and
you'd get a perfect, like you'd get set up, it'd be perfect. You'd be like, okay, you tick the safety off, and then he'd start again, and then you'd have to move, and it seemed like every time you'd land ready to shoot, he would move again. He would be gone. And then there was 2 or 3 of them all in that mix.
Yeah. So it was a matter of like, okay, which one is gonna stop here, and trying to look through all of that in the scope, and then next thing you know, I think I was just about ready to zero in.
Oh, you were doing great, and I'm going, Martissa, you're doing great.
Right.
Take your time. There's nothing to like, because we had like probably 40 minutes of shooting light left or something, legal shooting light. So I was like, don't worry, we could take as much time as we need. And then all of a sudden we start hearing put, 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 put of this ATV. And I'm like, no.
Yeah.
So we had 3 squirrels, and that truck pulls up, or that ATV pulls up. And when he called me over, I was like, because I was just hoping, he goes, you have permission to be here? And I was like, yes. And he's like, from who? And I say, from my friends down the road. And he's like, get over here.
I know.
And it was like, as soon as I started walking, right, now it's like over. Blew our cover, and those squirrels knew we were there.
And it wasn't like I could, just while you were over there handling your business, I could just go ahead and take that shot really quick,
I swear to God, I was thinking though, I'm like, I call it the imp of perversion, like, you know, that little evil voice in your ear. I was like, I should just take the rifle right now and take the shot, because then the squirrel's dead. What's it gonna do? Make me just leave the squirrel on the ground?
Yeah.
But then I was like, oh, and then this turns into a movie scene.
Yeah,
and this just
right.
all goes bad. You know, I just discharged the rifle while he's, you know, yelling. So,
which I think he would have been all legally covered for. Honestly, let me just think that through. He doesn't own the squirrel. It wasn't really his land. Yeah, but you know, it would have been unethical.
Right,
It wouldn't
right.
it wouldn't be illegal.
And then I would have been a jerk.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
Right.
it wouldn't have been good, but it wouldn't have been illegal.
Yeah.
But yeah, just out of respect, obviously. But I was sort of thinking the same thing as I'm walking off. I'm like, God, I hope she takes that shot. Just because like we'd worked really
We
hard.
worked so hard.
And you know, what did you guys think, by the way? Like, how did it feel for you, Martissa, to like? Your shoes, by the way, were not exactly outdoor
Not perfect.
shoes, right?
Oh, yeah.
We had a bit of moisture, which was good, so the leaves weren't too loud. But we spent the day, it was like a long, quiet day in the woods, right?
Mm-hmm.
How did it feel like stalking? Because you were quite good. You got it all. Like, you're dialed in. Like,
Yeah.
you're good at it.
For me, it felt like a walking meditation the entire time.
yeah.
There was very, I love anything that like puts me all into the moment. And so for me, it was like, you know, and you showed me that, what was it called? The walk, the fox.
Oh, fox walk.
Fox walk. And it was like, it literally felt like I was in a yoga class and taking those really slow, intentional walks, like walking meditation. So I thoroughly enjoyed it. And it was funny because, you know, not to skip to the end of the story, because there's more details, but like when we were leaving and I realized like, oh, I'm not getting anything. I'm not harvesting. I was like, I want to be disappointed right now, but I can't even be disappointed because of how beautiful and incredible the experience was of being out there in those moments of real stillness and dialed in focus.
Yeah.
That was beautiful.
Yeah, and for people listening, fox walking, the kind of concept is essentially the foot that steps out. You don't really have any weight forward, because normally we basically are doing a controlled fall forward when we walk or run, right? But instead, you keep all your weight on that back leg, push that front leg out, and then touch down the outer heel first, then roll out the blade of the foot to the pinky toe mound, and then turn the whole foot flat. And what's nice about that is as you do that, you notice how you can feel if there's a twig that will break or something that's going to crunch or make noise. So pretty quick, because 4 people moving through the woods is a lot, but we were pretty quiet.
Yeah. It was interesting because as the day went on, it got drier, so the leaves were a little bit more crunchy.
That first thing in the morning, I was like, great, everything was wet.
Yeah, and it was like we were just little. We were really getting in there without making too much noise. But as the day went on, we were a little bit crunchier under our feet. But I mean, it was something beautiful to watch. I mean, and it's also a really beautiful time of the year. We're in the middle of, towards the end of fall, I guess. And those leaves and
the wind would come through and it would like rain leaves.
Exactly.
And it was essentially like the whole landscape is orange.
Yeah.
Right? Like beautiful burnt orange color. Like we're just in pumpkin the whole day, you know?
Absolutely.
So we got on a couple more squirrels after, and you did get another shot.
Yeah.
We were like, we knew we had like 30 minutes of light left. I was like, let's keep going, right?
Right.
And we just kept pushing through those woods. There was it's so much, just acorns everywhere, oak everywhere. And then we end up seeing another squirrel.
Yeah. And we did a very similar thing. We're chasing it around the tree a little bit.
It was a pretty vertical shot, this one, right? Like you're shooting pretty much straight up. Not straight up, but
it was a high angle, yeah.
Yeah, real high angle.
Yeah, but you got a nice presentation of him at one point.
Right. And yeah, so it was nice to be able to like, I saw him set up that shot, but this was the piece. I didn't get a great headshot. It was more of a body shot because he was moving too. He was moving a lot. So I finally was able to set up the shot, get a good clean shot on him, and almost the same exact thing happened. He lurched.
Well,
heavier
it
than
looked
that
like
last
he was
one.
going
Much
down,
heavier.
though.
Yeah.
I thought, based on my experience, I was like, this is the part where he hand by hand loses his grip, falls out of the tree, and then it almost appeared. I know couldn't be what actually happened, but it kind of looked like he fell and then swung back over to the trunk somehow.
Yeah.
And then zipped down that tree.
Yeah.
And then, was he on the ground at one point?
He came down off the tree and then went back up.
Same tree.
The same tree.
And we knew, and I was like, great, we know where he is.
Right.
So I came around and flanked, and you came around and flanked,
Yep.
and we basically pushed him back up that tree.
Yep.
And then he was like gone.
disappeared.
And there wasn't a lot of leaves on that tree. So we were going around the tree like, where is he? And then I
Yeah.
see there's a hole in the tree.
He slipped right in there.
Slipped in that hole, and then he was sticking his face out looking at us.
I know, which I was kind of surprised that
I was
he
a little
even did that
surprised,
too, because he knew we were there.
But he was injured pretty bad. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it was like, yeah, I won't tell the next part. So
Yeah.
then we basically, we knew, like, and for people listening, if a squirrel gets into a nest or a hole in the tree, they're going to wait you out. I mean, you'd have to camp there basically, and at
Right.
some point maybe you come out, but you're not going to get them. So we kept looking, but it just was getting darker and darker, and we found more squirrels.
Some squirrels in a nest. They were running around, and we thought they slipped right back into their nest, so we obviously weren't going to mess with them. And then
Till we're 100 yards away, and Rod tells us.
Rod
Eagle
tells
Eye
us.
over here. I'm over here jumping up and down, so they're circling around the tree, and you
Staring
guys,
up.
you guys told this beautiful story of what it's like to walk, and I'm watching you guys do this. I'm like, oh yeah, they're looking at their feet, carefully taking a step. Meanwhile, there's 2 more squirrels that come out of the nest, and I'm jumping up and down doing the YMCA trying to get their attention, like, hey, but I, just like earlier, I can't scream to you and scare them off. And then by the time that you guys finally look up, they were on your side of the tree, and you guys were looking down. And you look up.
I don't believe this really happened.
They were on your side. Both of them were scurrying up, and they stayed up there about, I'd say, 6 feet above the nest.
Okay.
And then they eventually went about 10 feet above, but then it got thicker at the top of the tree.
Yeah.
So by the time they were on your side, I had lost a clear sight, and I'm just praying that by the time you looked up, you'd see him. But
and it's like it's literally maybe a couple minutes before.
Right, because we had till 6:05 and it was like 6:01.
Exactly.
And you can see that thing that happens if you have binoculars or you have the scope, because it gathers light. Mm-hmm. It looks real dark, and then you hold up the scope and you're like, oh, I could still take a shot, because you get that amplification of light.
Right.
But I mean, the squirrels were also they were getting away before all the night shift predators start coming out. Right. So,
Absolutely.
So you had, I think what's cool is the range of experiences, especially where you're a couple, so you'll be talking about it and everything, and you go back with this conglomerate of experiences. You had experiences that are also common, but suck to have, which is that you shoot something and injure it, and then you can't recover it. And as I've been saying to you this weekend, I'm like, get it out of the way now, because it's a thing that happens, and sometimes it happens with a bigger, more charismatic animal that weighs on your heart a little heavier. Yeah. Which, not to just say a squirrel doesn't, but it's just, I guess it's different than like if you wounded a giraffe or something. So if you're ever a giraffe, but like a bear, a deer, or something like that. But still, you get to have that experience. So now that you've had a night to sleep on it and everything, like. Where are you at? And I also will say, I don't get any impression this is deterring your determination.
No, which I think is really cool, because I feel like both of us had the experiences we really needed to, because my biggest fear was wounding an animal and coming out here and being like terrified. But it's really something interesting about it. Felt it felt almost too natural. What was like happening in my body. I for sure thought the first time I took a shot, I was gonna break down into tears. I thought I was just going to be that person. And the level of alignment and clarity and just a part of the cycle that I felt, that was honestly probably the most profound part of all of it for me, was really recognizing, oh, this is what we do.
Yeah.
Like this is what we do, and this is also the cycle of how this all happens. And it still makes me a little cringy saying it, because my history is going back and forth between being vegan and all these things, and so I still there's some programming there for me, but it's undeniable what I felt of being like, I just injured 2 squirrels today. And that's heavy stuff. Like, that is very, very heavy. Those are living creatures and animals. But there's something clear about the way that the world works.
Yeah.
That's not all rainbows and sunshines and the little Bambi running and Alvin and the chipmunks running through the, the Cinderella's forest, So there's some real conflict that had to be held in my spirit. And I almost feel like that's exactly what I came out there to do, was to experience that and hold that and be grateful for the life that I got to interact with.
Because you can hear somebody talk about that, and like intellectually you can get it, but you're never going to really get it until you experience it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And, piggybacking on what you're saying, Grant, it's like if all your food comes through the way that most people's food comes, supermarket and restaurants, and that's the only food experience, then it's easier to be swayed by like a vegan argument because intellectually it makes sense.
Yeah.
But when you actually go out there, it's like, well, that's a lot harder because I have a lived experience of something that's so human, and supermarket and tofu is not that human. So it's like, it'd be hard now for somebody to tell you that was wrong, because you'd be like, well, come with me, and then you see.
Yeah. And I think it puts you back in your place in the like circle. I think that's what I keep thinking about is like, when we were talking earlier about the predator situation, that still, like, I'm a predator, that makes me real cringy. That makes me feel real uncomfortable.
I will say I cringed a little bit after I said it. I was like, I called myself a predator because the human version of predator is like, the semantics behind it is just ridiculous.
Sure. A rapist, a murderer, a psychopath.
Right.
I gotta say though, when I was filming Rod from behind, I was like, he looks like the Predator.
With his dreads.
And my massive head. People have to realize I have a large cranium. And so
you're wearing that hunter orange hat with none of the snaps on the snap.
Right.
Yeah.
Like 2 inches between the pieces.
So funny.
Just imagine Lil Wayne hunting. I'm much more handsome than
much more handsome. I want to say too that both of you, I saw you get really into it, but had very different experiences. Your experience felt so internalized, and I sort of felt like just leaving you alone to do your process. Yeah. But then, especially, I watched, because all those things you just described, Martissa, I was like, all that's going on, but then you were like a kid. We were having fun. Like, we watched that little bit of video last night, and it's a scene of you and I running around the tree and laughing.
Yeah.
And if you remember, it was a lot of like, put the gun right on my shoulder, right?
Yes.
I'll put my hand here, you put this here. And you and I were having like it was very playful, which I think is why we were missing some of the stuff you were seeing, because we were so focused on trying to get this thing done that it was like, there was a in addition to, there's the seriousness of taking life, and then there's the sadness of a wounding experience. All that's happening, yet there's also joy happening and fun happening, and this livingness that emerges up out of the heart when you're moving through a natural environment in a way that you're sort of meant to. And another thing that really, well, actually, I don't know if you want to comment on that or anything.
No, I completely agree. I would love to see that footage, because I think it has to be, it almost looks like we were like maybe 5-year-olds running around in circles, just cracking up and laughing about, what we can and cannot do, and playing around. And I don't know, that's what real joy feels like to me, is being able to
really
tap into that childlike nature.
Yeah. And then the other thing, I was saying it to you guys last night, I'm not used to, typically if I go hunt with a bunch of people, like let's say it's like a duck hunt and we're all sitting, or maybe it's a hunting camp where we're all going to hang out, but then the next day we kind of go out solo or in twos. But being 4 people, all 4 of us sitting here, walking through the woods in that straight line feeling, felt like it could have been 30,000 years ago at some points. We're all using our unique gift set to ply the environment for information. We're all barely talking, moving in unison, starting to communicate. It's just so natural.
Yeah.
You get that thing where you just know, like, to make yourself 2 inches shorter, and you just know to sort of when to stop. You hear a sound and you freeze, and all those things that just naturally happen. And I was really grateful to get to experience that feeling, because I'm so much less interested in modern sport hunting than I am in ancestral ways of being. And so, but in order to hunt in the modern world, as you guys have no doubt experienced, there's hunting licenses, and you got to go to Cabela's and get your stuff in it. And all of a sudden you're drawn into this thing that isn't really that tasteful to you, but then is the avenue. You know what I mean? So that's how you get there. So, and I'm grateful all that stuff exists, but it's not what gets me there. I'm more excited, like what I really love watching are these old 1940 black and white videos that followed Inuit hunters on the ice, to get seals with their traditional tools. Like, I'm like, that's what I want to do.
Yeah.
Not like, clay pigeon shooting or whatever. All that stuff doesn't really get me. So I felt something yesterday that I hadn't felt before, and it was like, it felt good.
What was cool too is like how we would respond to one another non-verbally.
Yeah.
That was really cool. I was just thinking about like because Daniel, you were up front, like every time you would stop, it was like a little gentle wave in the amount of like, oh, okay, stop. He's looking that way. I'm going to look this way. This kind of feeling that was very in tune without having to say a word.
To carry on some of the things that we were talking about, you had your experience and you guys shared, like I was scoping out while you guys were on your hunt. And for me as a kid, like a lot of my time spent playing was alone. And I also learned best that way. I'm a doer. And so kind of just being out there and seeing like, okay, this is what this looks like. And trying it on in my own body was a very interesting experience because like you got that explanation of that walk. I took my first few steps and these first few steps were loud. And I was like, oh, this isn't going to work. And so I was like, funny story, my mom, lightest sleeper in the world. So when I was a kid, I had to learn how to walk very quietly. And
like a rocking chair bottom, right?
Yeah.
Where your foot moves.
And like in our house, like I'll scare her all the time unintentionally because, what am I, 6 foot 165, but I walk like feather
Silent.
steps.
Yeah.
Like you do not hear me in the home when I'm moving. And so I applied that out there. And, had this experience of realizing, and it just clicked, like I have innate abilities that I can contribute to the group that we're all working on the same thing. So I'd be like, okay, they're looking east, I'm gonna look north, or I'm at this point, so I'm gonna watch this direction while they do this. And it really did feel very similar to what I would imagine was going on 30,000 years ago. Like you said, it was this incredible. I really feel like it made our hunt a little harder, obviously, us being 4 humans disturbing one patch of nature at a time. But I do think that there's something that if, someone hasn't had this experience of being in unison with other people, you got to try it. Because it was a very nonverbal team building as well.
Yeah, it was like a team building.
Yeah, we had the same goal, but we contributed to it in our own unique ways. And that for me was it brought the humanity into it so much deeper. And as you said, I didn't have a stake on where I was gonna go. Well, I had some beliefs of what I thought I wanted to be as a hunter prior to having this experience, but what was it based off of? And so then having this experience and seeing like, oh, I know what feeling I want. And how I alluded to earlier, I want that feeling of being in alignment with nature, with my own humanity, with tapping into the parts of my brain that are innate, that are here, that cause me to survive, that intuitive knowing, oh, this is a loud branch, let me stop, or what was that sound to my east? What those things that just pop out and show you that like, you're supposed to be doing this, that I feel is like the ultimate experience that I pray anyone that's curious, if you're like me and you're listening to this and you're like, oh, I think I want to try hunting, like get out there, find a way, find some people and get this human experience because it's transformational,
What about all the stuff that wasn't the hunting but was part of it? Because a couple things occur to me. We spent a lot of time listening to the birds and other mammals that were around. Those chipmunks, the red squirrels. There was a pileated woodpecker. I never know if you're supposed to say pileated or pileated. Anyway, big woodpecker. There was also all the sign left behind. So you see like, okay, just like if I see some old beer cans around or, I found a boot in the woods the other day, it's like people leave sign and we know that. But then it was like, oh, this is where a red squirrel's been eating, and this is where a gray squirrel's been eating, and here's where a deer's been bedding and shitting over here. And so you guys were getting really tuned into audio and visual that in a way that if you weren't hunting, you probably would just walk by a lot of that stuff. Not just you guys, but anybody. Just aren't really paying attention to, but hunting forces you to then, if you want to be successful, tune into your environment at a level that you don't normally get a chance to. So, let's talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it kind of goes back to like the foraging conversation to me. Is like as I learned to identify different plants, I began to see them everywhere. And you begin to know their behavior and what they look like in different parts of the season and all of that. And so it felt to me in a very similar way to the animals. It's like, oh, I get to learn all these new friends and how they act, how they live, what they do, how they do it, that kind of thing.
What they say.
What they say. I mean, that was really interesting with those freaking red squirrels. They were just had a lot to say.
It was right when we spotted that first squirrel.
Right,
That's when
right.
we started.
Bro.
I know you're gray, but still.
right, exactly. And just thinking about the communication of all of the animals in the forest looking out for one another and telling each other like what's happening. It was like very interesting to be a part of and to recognize, because I mean, we go on just hikes all the time and you hear the squirrels and the birds start chirping as you're walking through and you're just like, oh, they're just talking to each other. No, they're talking to each other about you. Yeah.
Yeah. It was awesome. You know, back home in Rochester, I had the pleasure of teaching a outdoor mindfulness class. Like, they wanted me to teach yoga, but they didn't think it through. I love those people, but they didn't think it through. And it turned into a very mindful nature walk. We did some asana postures, you know, but what I really wanted people to do, which, as you said, most people don't do when they're outside in nature, is take in everything. And that, I think, you know, you had your journey and your experiences in this hunt, and I think one of the big things that I personally was also taking away was just like, I saw some scenery that, like, you know, if those images flash before my eyes on my deathbed, I will have the biggest grin on my face. Like, we were at one point walking through like this tunnel of, I don't even know what trees they were, but all the leaves were the exact same color. And I love beautiful visuals, and it was just like this opening, and as we walked into it, the leaves just started cascading down. And, you know, we're all in this line, and I'm looking at us, and I was in the back, I was tailing behind just because I like to see everyone in front of me. But I'm witnessing the scenery, and I'm just listening to the sound too. And I said this, I didn't know how loud a leaf is falling from a tree. Yeah. It was setting off like my little instincts so much. And I was like, okay, we're going to just learn to ignore that sound and listen for a different sound. Yeah. But just the beauty of taking in the sound of a breeze hitting the trees, the sound of, you know, that blue jay in the background, but then you hear the little rustle in the leaves to your left. Like, even that alone, if you're not going out to hunt, it deepens your relationship with the world, and it's just healthy. It's cathartic. You know.
Yeah. I don't know if you were doing it intentionally or consciously, Rod, but I kept seeing you catching leaves as you were walking.
Yeah, I was definitely doing that intentionally, you know, because it felt like a blessing of more alignment. I'm here in the moment. Ooh, my heart. But I'm here in the moment that this leaf is letting go, and I'm crossing paths with this thing as it's, you know, going into its own version of a cycle, and I'm on that journey witnessing it. And I felt that I'd be blessed that if I just stick my hand out, if a leaf fell into my hand at its natural sway. Yeah. And so that's what was going on when
that's,
you know,
a neat way to put it.
Yeah.
It's a neat way to put it, man, because somebody will say to you, like, how could you go into the woods and kill animals? It's like, you haven't. This is the smallest part of what it is, too. It's such a small part as we are sort of unfolding it. It's like there's a lot of magic there, and I think I had the best day, to be honest with anybody, because I got to feel like I got to facilitate some of those experiences, and then seeing you had those experiences, I was having them with you guys in a way that maybe sometimes I get a little cold too if I'm like on a bit of a mission or something. Because I felt like yesterday was just this endless time out of time that we had. It was I was so keenly open in the space that we could just, I don't know how to even say it, but I was not in my normal waking state. I felt like I was high a little bit or something.
Yeah. I mean, it showed. It showed your enthusiasm was just beaming.
Oh, good. Yeah, I'm glad to hear that. I really, really appreciated getting to share that with you guys. And then we came back last night, had another epic conversation.
We talked too much. We talked too much in the last few days.
I was like, oh no, it's like after midnight, you know?
right.
And I know we had to get up this morning, but I really enjoyed our conversation. And then today we butchered a squirrel. So I'd love to just hear your thoughts on that, because that kind of brings it full circle. Ate them, hunted them, you know, we did all the shooting and everything, blah, blah, blah. And then it was like taking that squirrel apart from the fluffy little cute critter to meat, you know.
Yeah, I'll definitely open that because I didn't say it, but one of my bigger fears wasn't the wounding of an animal, but it was like the reckoning. I don't know, that's not the right word, but like if I had remorse, I already did it. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm, yeah.
So when I almost felt blessed that she had her squirrel show after I had taken mine, like after I had taken my shot, because I had time to process real quick. I was like, I'm about to handle this warm body of this animal that I have made this love affair with in my brain. And, you know, fast forward into today with the butchering piece, at that point, I'm looking at, you know, this now dead squirrel. And I'm like, oh, I got to real get personal with him now. Like, you know, I can't hide the fact that you're dead now. Now I'm going to cut into you and do all this other stuff. Is this going to be brutish and barbaric the way that vegans tell me it is? And spoiler alert, it wasn't. Like, you know, once it started, I even said it to you. I was like, wait, this relationship is evolving. And I'm like, I'm no longer, I feel almost at that moment that it was disrespectful to think of it as just this cute little gymnast that tumbles through.
Interesting. Yeah.
I was like, no, like, yeah, you served, you had your life before I came along, and your life, your story isn't over. And I think that's one of the things that, like, humans, we get disconnected with loss and death is like, this thing's dead, its story is over. And I'm like, no, it's evolving now. Like, now my learning comes in. I learned the anatomy. I learned even you can handle it respectfully while I'm butchering it, while I'm, you know, doing all the things that we did. And that for me, it was very much full circle. It closed this part, and I don't want to say closed my heart, but it closed my fear. There we go. It shed my fear around this process that, you know, I was force-fed this idea of the air quotes, the reality of, you know, what this process is. And now I'm looking at supermarket meat like, you evil
grotesque
people, like, how dare you build a relationship out of them. But
yeah.
Did you even see any leaves falling?
Right.
man, I came straight to his home. Have you seen his home? He's got a nice tree, okay? But yeah, I mean, I learned a level of anatomy, and I learned
you have this EMT background, and obviously, you know, I've been an EMT a couple times, so I'm familiar with the physiology and anatomy piece. So it was cool to see you get to see, and also you with the yoga background. So it's like, I can say to you guys like, oh, the latissimus here, the lats, or here's the pecs, or, you know, here's the glutes, and here's the, you know, we could talk about how that anatomy is the same as our anatomy. And I enjoyed watching you get into the heart and lungs, because you wanted to take your time. I'm like, just reach in there, pull it out. You're like, I want to see everything. And so I have actually never spent as much time like on a squirrel's diaphragm as we did today. I was like, okay, this is kind of cool. I've never, you know, I just hadn't been that, because you were really wanting to see every part from a medical perspective.
Yeah, and like, because it was my first kill of an animal, and I wanted, like, again, that reverence continued after its life was taken. I wanted to take my time in witnessing this body that I know I'm going to consume, but I also wanted to get to know the parts that I may not consume and understand why. But also see them in the, you know, again, I have a human heart, it has a squirrel heart. Like, obviously same function, but there's differences, and the differences are important. You know, its life and its body are catered towards different things. I was making jokes about the ratio of his size of his legs.
Yeah, you were like, if this was scaled up to a human,
I'd be running
athlete.
Like, you know, and so, you know, honoring it as a squirrel and not as this cartoony perspective that I had of it. That was what was happening for me. And yes, because let's be real, how many times, I mean, if I keep shooting my middle finger the way I'm shooting, I may see a lot of hearts and lungs, but you know,
call this episode "Shooting with Your Middle Finger."
Oh man. But, you know, I also know, like, how many times am I really going to look and be able to see the valves of a heart and, you know, see you know, humans, our lungs, we do some jacked up things to them. So, you know, oftentimes when you do see a human lung, if you're lucky enough to, they're not in great shape like that. Right. So it was also...
Are they always gray? brown or black like that? Like, you know, when you see like human lungs, like all of the stuff we breathe, it's like a filter, and they just they turn that like dirty color of like grayness.
Yeah, and so it was just an extension of the reverence, you know, the taking the time, making sure also that I got as much of that harvest as possible, because like I said, I prayed about that, and I wanted to be able to take in as much of the bounty as I could as a way of honoring that animal. Like, no, you're not going to go to waste. I'm going to make sure, and then I'm going to treat my body right after I've taken you in, and I'm going to hone my body so that way you're not just some, you know, sacrifice. You know that. Because I mean, we're becoming each other. I'm, you know, his life and everything he ate is sustaining me now.
And that's what's so cool, is that whole experience then becomes part of your living tissue matrix.
Right.
You know, so it's like that's why it's another thing I'm always trying to explain to people about hunting, is that when you know, we didn't talk about it a lot this weekend, but everything I fed you guys, there's all these stories to it, stories of days like what we just had, you know, experiences I remember. So as I'm cooking that and making my body out of it, I'm also replaying those memories, and they're part of that meal too. And so getting to then, even if I don't tell somebody the story, when I serve that food, that story is being communicated to them too. Yeah, it's like a legacy. And so that's like one of the ways the animal's honored in my mind too. You know,
absolutely.
What did you think of butchering? And you were a very different person dealing with the legs and arms than you were dealing with the livers and hearts.
I know. It's kind of weird because like I definitely expected myself to be a little bit more prissy about this whole thing. But it was funny because it definitely came out a little bit with the hearts and the lungs.
Not much.
Not bad, but I felt it.
You just had that face like, ooh.
And I think also it was because I hadn't had any organ meat before. So I was like, do we really gotta eat this part too?
Oh, yeah, because after I cooked you the heart and liver, and you were like, you ate the heart, you're like, that's pretty good. And you ate the liver, you're like, I'm not mad about that.
Yeah.
I was like, that's different than saying I love it, but it's a lot better than saying I didn't like it.
Right. I mean, it was an important piece of it. And it's something, you know, when I've told people, you know, I want to get into hunting, I'm hunting, and they're like, well, are you going to butcher your meat too? It's almost like it's one thing to kill it, but then you're going to go and like
that level.
do that too. Right. And I was like, I mean, it comes back to the reverence piece. It's like, I want to have and be in connection as deep as possible with this animal and with my deeper understanding of this world. And how am I going to do that? By just shooting them and passing them off.
You almost owe it to yourself and the animal. It's like, you know, I created this relationship with you. I might as well see it through instead of making it wildly impersonal. And,
right.
You know?
Right.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it was incredible. I mean, my intention will be moving forward is to eat the heart and the lungs of all the animals that I
heart and liver.
Heart, lungs. Oh God.
Some people do though.
Oh really?
I've never even eaten a lung, but I mean, some people do.
But the heart and liver, to really again like have that reverence and that respect,
right?
And not waste.
Right.
Yeah. So it's important to me.
Do you guys see yourselves? Where do you see it going from here? Do you see yourselves picking this up as a practice?
We're going home tomorrow to get our first first rifle, so we're ready.
Yeah,
we're ready.
You guys gonna get a 22?
I think so.
Yeah, we had long conversations about that last night, and it's like I'm like a kid in a candy store, and you know, I was shooting before I got into hunting, so like I knew I enjoyed handling firearms. I knew I was pretty decent at it, and so. You know, the journey continues, as Nipsey would say, the marathon continues, really. You know, I'm definitely excited. I will be very honest, there's a part of me that's on fire. Like, it is a blazing fire inside me because I have, as you've also heard from stories, like I have a mean competitive streak. And it's like a competition with myself to be better. And I'm just like, okay, today's day one. Well, it's not day one anymore, actually, but you know, this is the beginning of the journey, man. Like I'm with this, like with TV shows that we'll watch too. I'm like, I can't wait to see what character development looks like at this point. Like, So yeah, we're
Plus, last
gonna
night
be-
you said something to me. You were like, "It's really hard for me to be here right now and relax, knowing all those squirrels are out there."
I wasn't gonna say that, but now the viewers know, so the door's open. Yeah, no, in my brain, I'm like, I know I can take a squirrel. I know when I go home and we get this rifle, New York's got a beautiful bounty, and I had the skills to do it. And now we had the skills to butcher and all that. And so I'm like I said, my brain's on chapter 10 right now. I'll be honest. I'm thinking like, okay, I'm going to try this seasoning with the squirrel. And I'm gonna do this.
Do you know what the season and bag limits are like where you are?
To be honest with you, I'm not certain, but quick internet searches.
They're pretty similar, I'm pretty sure, to
probably open right now.
Maine. They're open, but there's a
imagine.
couple like gray squirrels you can only take 4 here, right?
Right. Yeah.
And I think it's very similar in New
Yeah,
York.
and you might have it broken up by district too.
Yeah.
Because that's a lot of times it's done that way.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm excited to see you in the journey. What are you thinking about it?
I mean, same. What has stuck for me, there's 2 things. The first one is what has stuck for me in being here with you and being able to eat all this food that you were able to have this relationship with. I'm like so jealous and like really looking forward to being able to like not have to go to the grocery store and pull out some sad cow,
Yeah, because we ate squirrel, bear, deer, I think. Probably.
Little
and
moose.
moose.
Oh yeah, and you brought moose over, Grant.
Yeah.
And I mean venison, right? It's like pretty both
Nuts.
moose and deer, so good, right?
Yeah, so good. And then, so I'm excited about that. So I'm excited to get out and deepen that relationship with the environment and with those animals. And then I'm excited to be exponentially better at it next time we come and hunt with you.
You guys are very talented, both very talented people. Seriously, I mean,
that.
You saw Grant. I mean, it was like they were off and running really fast, right? Like you guys shot so well that I was like, because I've seen a lot of people not be able to shoot very well, and then you're like, then you're worried about what's going to happen. Blah, blah. You guys were just off and running, so I see you guys developing really quickly, and it's just going to be a matter of the biggest part is finding spots that you can go.
Yeah,
That's the biggest part.
And it's a little harder.
But I don't know. I think that you guys are going to figure it out pretty easy.
Okay.
There's places that are public and that you can go, and
Yeah.
I think you're going to dial that in.
To bring this conversation full circle, and I mean like to the beginning of your conversation on the Naked Pod, it goes back to when we go home though, we're not with you.
Yep.
Right. And so we're looking for hunting communities. We're adults getting into hunting, but we're people of color. We're Black, African American, whatever your favorite phrase for us
whatever
is.
your euphemism is.
We still do. Like I'm in EMS and I work for a company that's got a pretty rural population of coworkers. Yeah. And so we have a humongous hunting population. And I'll be honest, I think I told you this story of when I expressed my interest to hunt with one of my supervisors. Like I'll just leave it at that just in case they listen. But one of my supervisors, he jokingly said, he was like, I'm not going into the woods with you with a gun. And,
White guy or black guy?
White guy. And so he doesn't know the thing, he's a very funny guy, big heart.
Yeah.
And so I know his intention,
right,
but he doesn't know what he just said.
Yeah.
And so it shot me down a little bit because I'm like, okay, well, maybe I'll deepen our friendship and then you'll change your mind, or we'll go to the range together and I can show you I can shoot.
Middle finger shooting.
Yeah. Maybe I'll hide that part at first until he sees my, my spread. But, that's one of the things that, to be honest, I do think about is, we're going to more than likely continue our self-taught journey until we meet fellow people that are open-minded, that are willing to work with or hunt with, fresh adult hunters. Yeah. And so, our journey is just beginning, and it's this very unique story in New York as well, because a lot of New York, at least where we live, a lot of the hunting land is private. And you have to have strict permission from the owners of that land. And so, that's a barrier that we're at right now because the public land is saturated.
Right.
Like it is, so I'm excited and admittedly nervous for the journey.
Right.
Then we're out alone without a person that has, refined skills, but it's all a part.
That's just part of the learning
journey. We have some different issues to confront I had some different issues to confront, but some very similar ones. Also, I mean, because like I'm tattooed very heavily and pierced, and I'm short, which is like a thing that does impact how people treat you. You know, you know, you never hear like, "Oh, I love him short, dark, and handsome." I've never heard that before. You know what I mean? And so I've got these like things that work against me in how people see me. And then because I was raised without a dad, I don't have that sort of masculine edge that guys who grew up competing and having a dad who drove them to masculinity. I didn't start doing masculine things until I was more advanced in, you know, into my 20s and 30s. And so a lot of people who hunt, they recognize that something was really weird about me right off. So getting people to take me out, show me things, you know, I have some experience, especially as somebody who's in their 40s now, like people are like, wait, what? You know, but also then I experienced that it evokes a ton of compassion from people. And then pretty quick they go, oh, wait a second, this dude who's pretty strange is more interested in what I have to teach than my grandkids and my, you know, my nephews and nieces. And no one cares. No one's listening. Everyone thinks I'm a redneck. And this person wants to invest in me. I'm going to invest in them. And so that's one of the things that I found, because in hunting, people really want to share it because it's a lineal thing that's been passed on. So it's just you find those right people. Yeah. But I have this question. Do you think from on the racial perspective, because that's the part that I haven't had to confront, you know, is there more pressure? Do you feel more uncomfortable about how white people are going to feel about you being out hunting, or are you more uncomfortable with how black people will feel about you hunting? Does that make sense? Am I phrasing that right?
Absolutely. I mean, for me, it's definitely white folks, because black folks, they'll be like, girl, you doing what? I mean, but then that's like,
but they don't really care.
No, I mean, it's not like they're going to, you know, they're just like, that's really odd. From a white perspective, it's just a fear of running into someone who is a lot more ignorant and a lot more dangerous.
Yeah, sure.
That's the fear.
Sure.
I mean,
and being out in the woods by yourself with that person with the guns.
I mean, we where we live, there's active Klan still. You know, it's 2020, and I've ran into the Klan multiple times in my life living in upstate New York.
In New York?
In New York. Why? It doesn't even make sense. Why are you?
There's a lot of Klan in the north.
I think of it all that as so southern. That's
Oh no.
It's a lot in Michigan too.
I mean, I've even been to, like, they're not active sundown towns anymore. For anyone that doesn't know what a sundown town is, it's basically if you're black and you're caught in this town after sunset, you are legally allowed to be hunted.
What the fuck?
Yeah. And that's not that old. I mean, that is...
Yeah, it's like the 50s and 60s.
Even later in some states.
Damn.
We got to do some Klansman target practice. Which is like, you know what I mean? Like some Klansmen on target that you can like bring to the range. What the fuck? That's still a thing?
It's still a thing, yeah. I mean, for anyone that's skeptical, we have the internet. Go read about it. You'll be so surprised.
What nerds? They're like, I'm the Grand Wizard.
Dude, I never understood
Grand Dragon. Oh, yes.
You sit around in your bro club and talk about how much you hate these people you don't know.
Seriously. Exactly. Aren't we doing great in this room? I like what I see.
But yes, I mean, you know, answering your question, I'm not afraid. I've been weird my whole life. So again, black guy, 6 foot, dreads, funny voice. My nails are painted black right now. And I thought about that so many times when we were shooting, like physically shooting, but shooting on camera as well. I'm like, I know I look weird. Anyone that watches this that has no context of who I am, they're like, look at this guy. And
you guys are iconoclastic, though. I love that. You know what I mean? You're just who you are. You're not just trying to. You're not just conforming to anything. You're just individuals to me. You know?
And so, you know, I don't give a damn what the black community thinks, and I don't really care what the white community says. I just know that only one of them has a potential or a history that's shown that I could be in a little danger.
I think that's why yesterday I wanted to really make sure I shared with you that there are laws that protect you as a hunter, that nobody can interfere with your hunt. And a couple recommendations that I think would be good. So you learn the hunting laws, obviously, because you're going to need to. Get some phone numbers for local wardens and stuff, just so you know if you ever encountered something like that. Man, you put a stop to that real quick. That's a crime. You know, if somebody tells you can't be on land that you can't be on, obviously that's one thing. But if somebody's interfering or something or threatening anything like that, you have legal recourse. because like you have those rights, and it's like so important that you can exercise. But I guess the more that you are fully aware of them, so that if somebody's like, get out of here, you can be like, you get out of here. What are you talking about? You're interfering with my hunt, and I'm calling the warden.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Just so, because you can do that. And I think, you know, at least knowing that is something more than going in just feeling like that could happen and you wouldn't know what the recourse was. But it's hard to hear that, because I know the feeling of just worrying people are going to kick me off, because I've been kicked out of all kinds of places. And Grant and I have had multiple experiences of, man, remember that guy who made me measure all, he wanted to measure all my fish. Oh man, that's so frustrating.
Wow.
We've dealt with some jerks, you know, but we haven't had to deal with it at a racial level. So it's just like the idea of that pisses me off, but also makes me want to confront it. You know?
Yeah. Which I mean, in a lot of ways, I feel like we do that in hunting. I feel like we did that in hunting together yesterday, even just with that one guy. I mean, even everyone who kind of saw us, they're kind of like, you got on a Getty suit, you know, like it's like kind of weird. And just in that interaction, we're confronting some of that stuff on a subconscious level, which I think is really cool.
I will say it was hilarious, all of us getting out of the car together. And I'm just like, oh, this, like, I would even say it when I was opening the door. I'm like, oh, they're going to get a kick out of this one. Black guy walks out of the car with a rifle. Ooh, who is this? Daniel Vitalis walks out on the other side. Okay, all right. Black woman hops out the back. Super tall white guy hops out next to her like, what is going on?
Exactly. What is this scene?
Starts breaking your brain.
Meanwhile, the people whose house we're at are trimming, right? So we all get out of the car, and that's like a whole nother...
After we walked away, they all wanted to talk about it, but none of them did.
We're like, what the hell is going on here?
That actually gives, I want to ask you guys this question too. So when you come from outside of hunting into hunting, there's this moment, and we had a bunch of conversations prior where you were like, do I need to buy some camouflage? Don't I? All that. And I was like, I'll just loan you guys some stuff. And Rod, you got some background with fashion, right? I know you say don't bring it up, but you do.
Oh, yeah.
Tell me, how do you perceive modern hunting fashion? Because there's this thing where guys like to act like, people like to act like it's, you need this stuff, but it's really, most of it's signaling. So I can see somebody's camouflage and I know a whole bunch about it, what scene they're coming from, where they shop, like, you know, I know like, oh, that person's connected to the more modern hunting. Oh, that's some old world cheap stuff, or all these things. Like, it's mostly about other people, because you see the squirrels didn't even mind when we're wearing fluorescent orange that much. So, but at the same time, you do want to wear things that blend in, and you do want to blend into the environment. As you guys saw, I mostly wear earth tones of multiple shades and stuff like that. But because there's not like any good modern hunting fashion, and you guys are gonna have to buy stuff. So like, I'm just curious like how you're gonna approach that.
I at my job, I have great communication with my coworkers, and we all talked. And I slowly started to realize what you just said is there's different types of hunters. There's different, I'll call them cliques just for conversation. And they're represented at my job. But at first I didn't see. I was just like, they're all hunters with the same goal. That's so great.
We all just share a big vision together.
I had this blindness coming into it. And so to skip the meat and potatoes of that not so great story, I ended up listening to one of my younger coworkers. I think he's younger than me. I think he's only 24. I'm 27 for context. And he was like, yeah, just grab this and you'll be good. And he's like, I got this shirt for you.
You showed up with like a little kid's small camo shirt.
I was so mad because this guy's a bigger frame guy than me. Like, where did you even get this shirt? And
it's a compression shirt. What is this?
Yeah, and so, but he had told me that, if you go to this local store that you can get, you go to the youth section and they got all this stuff. You can get an extra large and it'll fit you because I'm, my waist size, it would work. And
because your waist is like a 22.
26, okay. No, I'm kidding. Now I feel like I have to say the real waist size. God damn it. But
what is it? I'm jealous.
A 32-inch waist.
Jealous.
So
never made it under a 34.
Oh man. So I get there and I'm looking around, and I even tried to call you in the middle of this because it is hilarious. I walk in there, there's $500 pants, there's $700 coveralls.
Yeah.
But then,
you were at like a Bass Pro Shop or Cabela's or something?
Sportsman's Warehouse. Yeah. So I'm in there and, I do some digging, but I do have a fashion background, so I do know how marketing is set up, where you're supposed to see the expensive stuff first. And so I did do some digging, and I found some pants that are a little affordable, and I unfortunately didn't try them on until I got here. And, they looked like they were going to fit great. And I made this joke. I was like, dude, I feel like I have on Hunter skinny jeans. Because they were like a straight leg pant.
Yeah.
And they had these liners on the inside that was really awesome. And, they felt comfortable in a sense. But when I look at the pictures and I would see our reflection, I would belly laugh.
That's so funny.
Because I will say that you're right. There's no fashion in hunting, but you're not there to look away, even though some people do think you are. But I looked at myself with a trucker style hat on that doesn't fit my head, and I got on Hunter's orange and camo pants. I don't know if you were catching it. I was throwing on a country accent from time to time because I was like, it just fits. So I'm like, well, shucks, I hope I can find myself a squirrel. Like,
I'm gonna let that slide right now.
So yeah, it definitely felt we stepped into different characters.
Yeah.
And so then when all these traits that we didn't know we had came out, that was a interesting piece of it. But I will say that's not the part I'm most excited about. Is shopping for the hunting clothes.
I don't think you need to. That's the thing, is like, it's so overrated. And a lot of it, like I said, like for instance, the big thing that started last year and is carried into this year in fishing is all this water camo. It's like, dude, you're on top of a boat or a shore. Like and then if you fall in the water, now you're dressed like water. Like, doesn't make any sense. People have been catching fish all along without water camo, and them looking up at you wearing water. It just doesn't make sense. It's so just funny. To look. It's just something cool to people. It signals I'm a fisherman. That's what you're doing, right? You're saying I'm a fisherman. When you're wearing shirts with oak leaves all over it and maple leaves and acorns and stuff, you're communicating I'm a hunter.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I think that's a big part of it. Now, I think there are hunts where it's crucial that you are well camouflaged, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's got to be this goofy stuff from the Sportsman's Warehouse.
Yeah.
So it's like a culture that I'm excited to see shift over time as it becomes a little cooler, because man, it's kind of brutal coming into some of that stuff.
I think you can expect to see current fashion trends make their way into the hunting world as this happens, because fashion, all it is an expression of culture.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, this is me and this is what I want you to know about me. And I found that out when I put my stuff on the next day. I even said it to you. I was like, I just have hipster clothes, bro. And you were like, well, you have earth tones? I was like, hell yeah, that's all I wear. And you're like, well, yeah, just throw. And I'm wearing an earth tone thermal now. And when we went out, I wore a deep maroon that got covered by camo colors anyway.
Yeah,
so
yeah, those zip over ghillie suits are great, because then you don't have to wear those silly clothes. You can wear your regular clothes, throw stuff on, and then when you drive into town and you need to stop at the gas station on the way home, you can just unzip that thing and you have regular clothes on.
Yeah, that's great.
Sure. Yeah.
Boy, so you. I don't even know. I don't know how we got there, but.
Martissa, do you want to talk about your podcast a little bit? Tell people what it's all about?
Yeah, sure. I mean, my whole desire and pursuit for life is really about getting free. I mean, that's why I want to start hunting, is because I want to be as free and self-sufficient as possible, from an emotional level to a political level to my ability to literally feed myself.
It's a social level too.
Yeah, social level. And so my podcast, the origin story is I got really into some of those biohacking podcasts. And I was really into it and just consuming so much of that wellness information. And I was really frustrated because, unfortunately, my lived experience of being in a Black female body never was acknowledged in ways that was really important, or that, was necessary for some of it. I mean, unfortunately, a lot of the biohacking stuff is so centered towards men and the research on men. So I was like, well, fuck that. I mean, and excuse my language, I can't keep digesting this information that isn't really for me. So what other way to do it but to create my own space for that? And so bringing in conversations about wellness and bringing in conversations about sexuality and gender and justice and hunting and all of these ways that we can culminate a life that gets us freer and freer and freer.
Yeah.
And that's really what the podcast is about. It's every episode is pick another one out the bag. What's it gonna be? But it makes an interesting, well-rounded conversation when you think about it from that perspective. And I've been really, really, really fortunate to have some really incredible guests, and I just started podcasting in July, so it's incredible, and it feels good to be able to make these connections with people all over the world who have similar but very different worldviews than I do, and to be able to have conversations that bring us together and quite literally brought me to Maine.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, we were talking about how when you're a podcaster, it's like you get to do a master class every week with another person. You get to learn so much, expand your, it's like going to college in a way. Yeah. Maybe minus the papers, but plenty of social media you got to do anyway. So, right. But yeah, it's an incredible experience. That's same for me. I mean, I'm just really glad we got to meet and connect like this. I'm walking away from this weekend really changed.
Me too.
That's amazing to hear. Yeah. Especially like because we're the rookies coming in here. Yeah. And like I was expecting to like I have feelings, like negative feelings about like relying on people too much. And I was like, dude, I'm gonna come here and we're gonna be in your house and then you're just gonna spend a weekend teaching us and we're take. And so to hear you be like, I grew in my own way, and like to also witness like your processes and how great of listeners and communicators you guys are. That fear is eradicated, and it's like, it just, my heart is so full, and the amount of time, I'm not a crier, so even me getting to the brink of crying as many times as I have in this weekend says a lot. Yeah. And even right now talking about it, I'm just like, wow, it's just like, just such a blessing to been able to exchange everything, Yeah. So yeah, it was like a Bardo's, like it's a concept that like you're at a fork in your road in your life. They happen all the time when you're, do I brush my teeth? Do I wash my face? Do I do? Yeah. Like you're always setting your path and this whole butterfly effect thing. But some intersections take you to a whole different state. And, we ended up in Maine.
In a whole different state.
Sometimes I get my analogies down and it works like that. And I sound like I know what I'm talking about. And so, that I love when that happens.
I definitely have to agree. And like, I don't know, I keep saying this, but I just really feel almost renewed in my belief in humanity in a lot of ways.
Oh, good.
Like to be able to be out here, and I was admittedly afraid, but doing it anyway and feeling like I leave here with 3 new really incredible humans in my life. Yeah. And crossing barriers and borders that like I'd never in my life really expected to cross. Right. And that for me feels like, like in this time of the world that we're in, which is really hard to, trust humans, it's like really incredible to have this deep and this level of connection and be like, I can renew some of that faith. Mm-hmm.
For me, there's this part, the piece about color has been very helpful. So that was a huge takeaway because you shared experiential stories of experiences that hearing face to face impacted me. So there was all that stuff. Mm-hmm. But there was a cultural thing that was way bigger for me than anything to do with color. It's that, and then there's that color piece, then there's this cultural piece, and then there's just an individual piece. So I want to hit them all. The piece about culture was that I felt almost like I was traveling because you guys exposed me to culture that I'm not exposed to. That isn't about, I don't think it's about color. It's it was just culture for me that was different. Yeah. So you said things that I'm not used to hearing in ways I'm not used to hearing them, even though I get to talk to people for a living. Yeah. And then out of the blue, it was like a whole bunch of new ideas that were like, I felt like this buoyancy inside from. Yeah. And then you're both very unique individuals. And that, I think, is some of the most impactful stuff, is that just as people, the conversations we were having, your willingness, our willingness, that part was like, I felt like I made really good friends. And so there's like all those things happened at once. So it's just like I said earlier, just very enriching. So the exchange of stuff between us was great. And obviously you're welcome out here anytime. I would love to host you again. And Hope you keep doing these things, and I'm excited to watch it grow for you, and definitely here as a resource. And
So that means we're friends.
Yeah, we're friends.
I can call you my friend.
Yeah. Are you ready for ice fishing? That's the thing. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
I love winter.
Let's do it.
Like I literally in my brain, I'm not even gonna lie to you. Like I told you, I'm always thinking about chapter 50. I'm thinking about us like years down the road, like on a hunt in a whole nother continent.
Finally get to Alaska.
But I mean, we could do Alaska sooner rather than later. But I'm just like, we could just have so many adventures, traveling the world, and like
fun.
learning, and also like sharing with. Head explodes,
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
Cool, and I would love to have more experiences where people don't understand what's happening when we all get out of the car, because that's a little hilarious. Good fun.
I love those situations.
It's a good inside joke
That's
too.
the best thing. Yeah. Well, I know you guys got to get on the road. I just am so grateful. We're going to put links to your podcast. Is there anything else you guys want to share or plug? Because there's some space for it.
You can, just I guess social media handles and things. You can find me at what's my Instagram? Let's Get Naked. I was like, wait, what the heck? You can find me on Instagram is LETSGIG. Wow, spell GETNEKKID. And that's almost anywhere. Naked.com.
It's pretty easy to find. Googling it around.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and me, I'm Rod Coleman. I recently founded a nonprofit organization that you're going to hear a lot of alignment in these conversations, but also centers around freedom and accessing it through different ways. You can see my website at forthefree.org. You'll learn everything you need to learn about what my mission is to consolidate it. Essentially, we take donations and grant money and help people who are willing to define freedom in their own way overcome those financial barriers to get into whatever it is. So, say someone listens to this and like, my son wants to get into hunting, or I want to get into hunting. My job is to make, these barriers easier to overcome. Yeah. So, you're not worrying about the financial piece. That's forthefree.org. And then I'm For the Free Inc. on Instagram, I believe. And that's the best way to reach me and see what we're doing. Send some messages. Tell us if you love us.
Yeah, we'll put links too, so people can give you a
couple
follow.
Of freedom fighters over here.
Something like that.
Awesome.
Well, thank you guys. You go home with a little meat, but I think I'm leaving with more. So it's really appreciated.
Thank you so much, Dana.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the WildFed podcast. You can help us grow the show by subscribing and leaving us a rating and review. It ensures better rankings and more advertiser interest, which translates directly into better shows, more awesome guests, and a constant stream of fresh, new content. Have a question you'd like answered on the show, or a hunting, fishing, or foraging trip you'd like to host us on? Email us at info@wild-fed.com. And be sure to visit our website, wild-fed.com, to check out the WildFed video show and store. WildFed. Food is all around you.